Today, I have with me a guest who has a very inspirational story. I was inspired when I read her background, everything that she went through, and where she is today. And I know that you're going to glean so much motivation from this interview. Today, I have with me Kim Rahir. She is a former journalist turned health coach and a survivor of multiple sclerosis, MS, turned European champion in master weightlifting. She helps midlife women to lose weight, get strong, and boost their energy by leveraging muscle mass and mindset work. Kim was diagnosed with MS 10 plus years ago. Last year, at the age of 60, she won a European Masters Weightlifting Championship, and she literally muscled her way out of illness. Kim's personal story made her change her career from journalism to coaching, and now she's on a mission to help women claim their place and their happiness in midlife. She believes that focusing on muscle beyond just the training and the eating can be a powerful driver of self care because it puts you in a spirit of building and nurturing your confidence and also really your strength, inner strength. Welcome to the show, Kim.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for all the work that you do.
Oh, thank you. I was listening to a couple podcasts you were on, and then watching a video you did, and was just really fascinated with your story. Could you back up a little bit and tell us and tell the listeners what happened? I mean, that must have been terrifying for you.
It was terrifying. It was really scary. I think it started when I was 45. My kids were small. My oldest was 10, I think, and we were living in Germany, in Berlin. I had a full time job, shift work as a journalist, and my three kids. And I thought I had it all. I had proven that I could have a career and a family. And then, really, from one day to the next, I was struck down. Was picking up my kids from school and I started seeing double. When you have like a knee that hurts, you can ignore it, or you feel a little bit ill, then you think, oh, I'm gonna get over this. But when you see double, there's something going on. So I went to the doctors, they sent me straight to hospital, all sorts of tests. They knew it was something autoimmune, but they weren't clear because I had various symptoms. And after a few days, I lost the control of my legs progressively. So after 3 weeks, from the hip down, I was completely paralyzed. I couldn't wiggle a toe. And because these symptoms, the eyes and the legs, it was kind of contradictory. They couldn't really tell me what I had. So that was super terrifying. And it gets you into a state where you think, please give me a diagnosis, no matter what it is. Please let me have herpes or whatever all sorts of things that they were considering. But you crave that clarity. Um, and then they settled after a while on a syndrome that's called Guillain-Barré, which is a one-off, which is good news. Was good news at the time. It's just it comes and it goes. And I was even lucky because it sort of stopped at the hips. Some people have those par- the paralysis go up to their neck and then they can't breathe and have to be ventilated. So I kind of got away. In German, we say with a blue eye, like with a bruise on the eye. But it took me 6 months to be walking normally again. I came home for Christmas in a wheelchair, and for my mental health, it felt that at that time there was like a door in my soul that had been opened, and behind was darkness. It's like fear creeping in, and I wanted to keep that door closed at all cost. This was a one-off, so I was okay. After a year of some treatment, I was given a clean bill of health, and they said that was over and gone. And I was so happy and thought, yeah, I get a new lease on life. And after another year, we had moved again. We were living in France. I felt my left hand going numb, and I knew that wasn't good. New tests. This time they said it was different. It was actually an attack of my immune system on the white matter in my nerve cells. And if it happened again, I was an MS patient. And I spent an entire year thinking it's not going to happen again. I tried to live as normally as possible and, not be obsessed. But I was attentive, and then because I was attentive, at some point I noticed that something was happening again. I did a yoga pose, and I felt a tingle in my spine, and I knew that wasn't good. More tests, and then they said, yes, that was relapse number two. You're now an MS patient. And that was so brutal because after the first one, that was already quite hard with the time in hospital, and spending time in hospital, I think is really traumatizing for anyone, um, because you become a thing. You lose your autonomy. You can't decide anything. Not when the light is turned on in your room, not when you have your first cup of coffee. I couldn't walk. I couldn't even decide when I wanted to go to the shower or to the toilet. So that had been really so distressing. And then for me to be given this green light afterwards, and then, being struck down again, that was really very hard. And the only way I could deal with this was by focusing on the present day, especially with MS. If you look too far ahead, you don't know where you're going. You could be paralyzed, you could be blind, you could have all sorts of troubles. You just don't know, and the doctor can't tell you. And I noticed that if I thought too far ahead, I was going to be so scared. So I thought, just focus on what you can do today. And that sort of helped me out of um, this moment, or through these moments. I also fought with the doctor for an hour when he was prescribing the lifelong treatment that you get for MS. He said, "Oh, it's lifelong treatment," and he was like writing this thing on his piece of paper, and just wanted to hand me the prescription and see me on my way. And I said, "Hang on, can we please talk about this?" Because my second relapse, it was so mild. It was just because I was attentive that I noticed it, and because it was so mild, maybe this thing is receding and it's not going to come back again. And if I get treatment, I will never know. Am I going to be fine because my body is better, or because I'm getting the treatment? Lifelong treatment is actually, I wouldn't have put it that way at the time. I was sort of fighting in the trenches and with the doctor, but looking back, I think I didn't want to give up my power, because I had felt what it is when you don't have power in the hospital, and I didn't want any of this. But he was patient at the beginning. He was not used to patients asking so many questions. And then I think he got a little bit impatient after an hour or so, and I had to give in. I started lifelong treatment, injecting myself 3 times a week. And it's not really pleasant because the injection sites get very sore, and I got flu-like symptoms every time. But I took over-the-counter drugs to deal with the flu-like symptoms. I really wanted to have a normal life. I didn't want to feel like a sick person all the time.
Mm. Do you have any symptoms to this day, or where are you at with MS?
So when I got my diagnosis, I asked the doctor if I could exercise. I said exercise. And he said, yeah, okay. You want to be careful, he said. I don't know what that means to this day. I think he just was like, supposedly exercise is good, but I don't know what's it's going to be like for her. And he's no expert, because doctors, they really go through hell to become a doctor. I thought, studying medicine is really such a long and arduous path, but they don't get really any training when it comes to physical exercise and nutrition. I think it's like 6 hours in their whole
Hmm.
curriculum, and exercise. He didn't want to any responsibility. And I was lucky because I talked to a nurse later who showed me how to inject myself, and she said exercise is great for MS, because it makes you fatigue resistant, and fatigue is a big problem in MS patients. So I thought that was my green light. I went to the gym, armed myself with a book that said women should lift heavy. One of the first at the time, I think it's from the late 90s, something, that book. And it said, ditch the pink dumbbells, lift heavy. And I started doing that. So I got physically stronger, like really fast. Um, all things that had been, reminders of my autoimmune problems, like reflexes that were lost in my legs and stuff. It all came back. Um, and mentally I totally changed because you when you feel physically strong, you feel mentally strong, especially. And I think it's linked to my hospital experience that I wanted to be like physically strong. I didn't want anybody to carry me to a toilet ever again. And after, hang on, I started 2000, after 4 years of injecting myself, I had changed countries, I had changed neurologists, and I asked my doctor, because I was totally symptom free, injecting myself 3 times a week. I had nothing. I was strong. I was fit. And I said, asked him if I could suspend the treatment for 3 weeks because we're going on a camping holiday. And I didn't want to have this, inject yourself in when you're camping. That didn't seem right to me. I said, is it okay to stop for 3 weeks? And he said, you can stop, for good if you want to. We're going to give it a shot because you're doing so well. And if you're happy to try, I'm going to support you. And I said, hell yes, I want to try to do without it. And I did. And I mean, I'm grateful to this doctor until today because it's really a little bit out of the box, and he just goes by, you know, the symptoms. And if there's no symptoms, he thinks, why should we keep on treating you? And this was like 6.5 years ago. I've been without treatment and without any symptoms ever since. So I'm not going to say that building muscle and strength heals MS, but I think it helped me really get out of this situation of getting stronger, and then the positive mindset that you gain from it, I think, has a huge impact on your overall health.
I could not agree more. I can really relate to your story. No, I did not have MS, but I was diagnosed with autoimmune at the age of 54. I'm 62 now. So I went through that as well with the injection of the biologics. And, you feel like your body's betrayed you. And
Yes.
I know when my diagnosis came, I had just come off of a bodybuilding show, national show, took top three. I was on top of the world and went from that, all the way plummeting down,
Yes.
back injury the same year. So I can relate to that feeling of like your body's betrayed you, like I said, and then just a sense of helplessness, and you don't ever want to feel that way again. Now with muscle, I'm such a firm believer in muscle for so many different reasons. It's a disposal for our blood glucose. It's the first place that we become insulin resistant as we age. There's the anti-inflammatory properties of muscle, certain things that are released that bring inflammation down. And we know that so many of these diseases, really, most of them are driven by inflammation. So I think that is one of the best things. Of course, nutrition plays into this, but oftentimes I like to start with the strength training with the muscle because so many of the other habits tend to fall into place around
Yes,
it.
absolutely.
Now, did you change your nutrition in response to this? Did you go on an anti-inflammatory diet? Did you eat more protein?
I did mostly change my approach to nutrition, and then of the things that I ate changed too. I didn't go on an anti-inflammatory diet. I was not told anything about diet by the doctors or the nurses. Nobody ever mentioned this. Um, since then, I have learned about this, and I, make sure that I eat anti-inflammatory foods every day. What changed was my approach because I started looking at food in terms of how is this going to build me back up? How is this going to help me with building strength and muscle? How is this going to nourish me and enable my body to perform? So yes, I started eating much more protein. That was a big one because I had been raised. My mom in the 70s, she turned vegetarian. So in my home, there was no meat, so there was probably very little protein. Also, I don't even want to think about this now about my growing years. Um, but I had to really change that. That was a paradigm shift for me, and from from then on, I was making sure that I had protein with every single meal that I ate, and it makes a big difference. And this moving away from worrying about bad foods and harmful foods and forbidden foods, um, and just changing the perspective and thinking, so what's going to nourish and nurture me, makes the choices so easy. And it's exactly as you say, when you focus on building muscle, then you just transfer that to your eating and you ask yourself, okay, what do I want to eat to make building muscle easier? So you don't have to worry or complicate things. You know that you want good quality protein and that you want a ton of vegetables for all those nutrients and enzymes and minerals and phytonutrients, all the stuff that's in vegetables, and we haven't even discovered everything yet. And that's it. It's so simple. And if there's any sort of place left, or you're not fully satisfied, or you want to have a donut once in a while or something. I mean, I don't care about donuts, but some treat. Your body is fine. It can deal with that if you make sure that it's well nourished and strong and functional when you eat. And I think this is a big shift that can help so many women.
So true. I don't know what the outlook is in Europe so much, but I know in America there's such this emphasis on the diet culture and women almost dieting like a hobby. I get clients who, maybe they're 60 years old and they've been off and on diets since they were 12 years old. It's still so present and so prevalent in our culture.
Yeah, it is, and it it's hard. I want to say it doesn't work. Well, diets do work. I mean, if you restrict yourself, you're going to lose weight. Problem is, and I see this with so many women, if you do that over and over again and you do not focus on protein and you do not strength train, with every diet, you will eat into your muscle mass and you become like, relatively fatter. Actually, you might weigh less, but the proportion of body fat and muscle in your body will keep shifting towards more fat, which is extremely unhealthy, and you will mess with your metabolism, with your energy levels, with everything. And it's also, I think, the diet culture has this idea that you just have to go through some hardship for a limited amount of time, like just like a march through the desert. And if you can just stick with it, like for 4 weeks or for 3 months or whatever it is, and then you come out the other end and then you have your dream body, and then you go back to what you did before. Nobody ever thinks that far. And I have friends who every month of May they start living on shakes and broth, miserable, hungry all night long just to get to a certain number on the scale. And then somehow they make it into the summer, and next month of May they start over because it's all come back on. And I think it's it erodes your confidence, and it also erodes your health because it will eat your muscle away and mess with your metabolism in a big way.
Yes, I agree. It puts you in a worse position each and every one of these diets because like you said, it's the body composition. So everybody looks at that number on the scale, but I'm always asking, what is that number made up of? How much of it
Yes.
is muscle? How much of it is body fat? And that is really more important than just some, phantom number that gets caught in our head, something we weighed when we were 15 years old.
Yes.
We want to get back to that number. And I do
Most
hear
women
that a
have a
lot.
number like that. They say, "Oh, when I
They
was
do.
that age, I weighed that much, and I want to go back to that." And that's the only thing. It's just a number. It doesn't mean anything.
Yes, yes. I want to ask you about your journalism. So you were a journalist and then you moved into health coaching. When did this happen and what type of journalism were you doing?
I used to work for news agencies mostly, so that's like the AP in the US. I worked for the French news agency AFP, and when you work for a news agency, you cover all kinds of topics. So it could be society, politics, economics, whatever came up. And we traveled around. My husband's a journalist too, so we traveled around the world, and from various countries we would report. And I followed him around when we got married. So he got the full-time job and everything, and I started as a freelancer. So I would arrive in a country and then just check out what kind of stories there were that would be worth reporting on, and then I would offer that to either news agencies or papers. And then towards the end, I that was just when I stopped my treatment. Also, that was all like there was a big change in my life. I had been working for TV a lot, and I didn't enjoy that very much. I love working with the people, and you're a team. It's a team effort. That's great fun, but information has become a commodity, like, I don't know, bread and cheese, and you you don't really go for the truth anymore, because you have to sell your information. So you're going to look for something that sells. And well, I mean, that's a whole different discussion, but I felt that this was not fulfilling anymore. It had nothing to do with the kind of impact that I want to have in the world. And because I had my story, and because I thought I was onto something with that muscle focus, um, I just felt this desire to share that message, and to help women embrace strength, and become confident. And compared to journalism, it's fun. It's great to find a nice story, and it's great to write a nice story. Storytelling is a big thing. It's very human, and it helps us connect. But if I can, help one woman on this planet feel better about herself, be healthier, and live a more fulfilled life, I think my impact is bigger than with no matter how many great stories I write. That will make me feel that I have really, helped something and left some kind of trace on this planet.
I love that. I love that. Muscle, I'm always telling people it builds that self-esteem, self-confidence. You feel so much better about yourself. And I know when I started competing, I had no idea of what it was going to do for me mentally. I was only thinking of, oh, I want to get in the best shape of my life. And that's why I started doing shows. But then the confidence out the other side, because I realized I didn't have that much self confidence going in, and getting up on that stage and doing something that absolutely terrified me, and then building my body, having muscle for the first time. I was pretty thin. I was a thin runner, marathon runner,
Mm.
totally
Yes,
different body.
different. Yes.
Totally different. And that was a fun time of my life. I don't regret it. But how I felt coming out of those first bodybuilding shows, I had never felt like that in my life. And then it led to me wanting to do other things, start my own business, change my career. And it's very, very freeing. Now, you too have competed. Tell us about that.
Yes.
What made you decide? Tell us about the competition and the outcome.
Yeah, it's a fun story actually, because I started lifting like what you call a power lifter. I know most people don't care about these distinctions, but like, doing deadlifts and bench presses and squats and stuff like that. That's what we call power lifting. And it's the same movements you do in bodybuilding too. You work on movements, but you work on specific muscles too. And I had a PT when we moved to Spain, and he one day said, would you like to try Olympic weightlifting? And the only memory I had of Olympic weightlifting was when I watched the Olympic Games with my dad as a kid. And, it looked like they were like strong men, but they all had a big belly, and they were wearing this ridiculous costume.
Yes.
Um, it was like, that was the only memory I had. But then he showed me the movements. Like, there's two exercises in Olympic weightlifting. You have to put the bar overhead in the snatch in one single move, and in the clean and jerk in two moves. So I tried it out, and it's so challenging. You can't believe it, because it's not only physical, it's also physics, because you have to, the bar has to travel very fast, but then it has to travel fast on a pretty precise vertical path. And to make your body do that, it's lifelong practice. So it's nothing that you can just do. I mean, if you start as a kid maybe, but I started when I was 55. So it's a learning curve, but I was hooked right away because of the mental challenge that goes with it, with the focus and like refining the movement. And till this day, I'm working on my technique, and I loved it so much that I signed up for a pure weightlifting gym away from the commercial gym. So no mirrors, no music, just a lot of iron, and like a family-like atmosphere, a club. I lived with people who are 18 and others who are 60, like me now, and I had been there for 2 weeks, and then someone came to me and said, "Hey, Kim, nice that you're training here. Do you want to compete?" The what? I thought I was too old. I said, "Do you know how old I am?" And they said, "I don't care. You know, we have other people your age, they compete." And then I said, "Wow, yeah, let's do this." And it's something. I'm pretty sure that in my 30s, I wouldn't have said yes. I think I would have thought, "Oh my God, I don't need this. I don't need this in my life. It's got to be a stressor." And, and at that point in time, I thought, wow, how exciting. Let's give that a shot. And what you just described about moving, going onto the stage, I can so relate to this. When you compete in weightlifting, the light is on, they call your name, and it's that moment, and you have like 60 seconds to make the lift. You can't go and say, "Oh, last week I lifted that much," or, "Oh, on a good day, I can probably lift that." It's that moment. So it helps with this focus on the present and, total focus on now. And it's exciting, it's scary, it's exhilarating, it makes you feel so alive. The very first competition I went on, I thought I was going to cry because the emotions that I felt were so powerful, so strong. There was so much going on in me. And then I just thought, oh, I want to do this over and over again. Um, and that's how I got into competing. And then I competed in the European Championships every year since 2019. And last year I actually won, which is
Wow.
also totally new. And this is something I noticed while this was happening, before, during, and after the competition. I never thought of myself as someone who could win. So it changed my identity again. And that's great if you can keep evolving and discovering new things about yourself also.
Were you in your high school years, were you ever into sports, or was that something that came much later?
No, as a kid, I was a gymnast actually. And then in my high school years, I played volleyball, but I was in Germany and everybody was making fun of me because they told me I was too short. I loved volleyball. Um, and then it was just sort of general fitness training, trying to stay in shape. So I never stopped moving really. But after my illness, I really got this laser focus and purpose that I wanted to be strong, and it changed everything for me.
Mm. I think competition too is so healthy. People tend to have a negative connotation with that. Oh, I'm not competitive. And to me, it drives us to be better. It drive and even competition with yourself, it drives us to reach for bigger heights. And I know for me that was just even when I ran, it was a big part of my running years was being able the competition part of it and feeling like for the first time in my life, wow, I'm really good at something. I remember thinking,
Yes.
wow, I'm really good at this.
Yeah, amazing. And it gives sense and direction also to your training. This is also something that I insist upon when I talk with women, and I always say, you don't exercise, train. Exercising is just doing something, and that's very nice, but training is you set a very specific stimulus for a very specific outcome. And I think in midlife, that's what we need. Just exercising is fine, and we need a baseline of movement. But if we want a specific outcome, we need to set a specific stimulus. And that's what's great about competing, because you have this rhythm. Like, you're going to be on the platform in 6 weeks. So you're following a certain training programmation that the coach does for you, but there's like sense and direction, and I think that's also something that adds a lot of quality to your life.
Yes, I love that you said train and not just exercise, because I do see this a lot in the gym, and I'm sure you've seen it too, where somebody just comes in and they're kind of random all over
Yes.
the place. Well, I'm going to do a bicep curl, then I'm going to talk a bit, and then I'm
Yes.
going to go to the front desk and get a water, and now I'm going to go back and maybe, I don't know, do a squat. And it's something they Googled and found on YouTube, and they're doing some crazy something. I see a lot of that. And the bodies don't change. And there's
Yes,
no
that's the thing.
direction. Yeah, no
Yes.
direction in focus. It's not intentional.
Absolutely. And that's what I hear a lot. Oh, I'm at the gym 3 times a week and I don't see any progress. If you do not, have like a really specific training program, if you do not follow progressive overload, this is also what happens women go to Pilates classes or yoga, which is great stuff. I have nothing against this. But I see this more in the recovery department, and it doesn't have the progressive overload. I had a client who had been going to Pilates classes forever. And there was a certain movement in the class that she could never do. She couldn't do on the first day, and she couldn't do after 2 or 3 years. And then she trained with me for 3 months. And then she came back to me and said, "Oh my God, all of a sudden I could do this movement." It's because you have to progress in your training, and that's something that you just, especially in midlife, I keep saying this, but you really need to be specific and know where you want to go and then do exactly what you need to get there.
Yes. I always say we need goals more as we age and not less. And in America, youth is so emphasized and glorified. And it's kind of like, oh, grandma, take a back seat once
Mm.
you're 50 and you've gone through menopause. And I'm like, no, 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 no. That's the time to lean in and do the things you've always wanted to do.
Yes.
Set some big, audacious, scary goals and go for it. Your kids are, they're grown. You're not, running young kids back and forth to sports.
No.
Maybe the career restraints have lifted a little bit, and you have this space. There's space now to explore these different things, but yet we're often encouraged to do just the opposite as we age.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think you should really become wild and adventurous, in that part of your life, because you have less responsibilities. Sometimes there, more stuff is thrown at you when, like, your parents are aging, and you're supposed, especially the women, weirdly enough, are supposed to look after the aging parents. So there are some stressors. um, but overall, it's more like this feeling that you don't really have to to prove or to secure so much anymore. Like you said, you've raised your kids, you've had a professional life, or you still have it. And you can sort of breathe and say, "Look, what's out there? What else can I do?" um, and really make the most of this. But many women tell me they feel that when they turn 50, they become invisible. And I find that sad and heartbreaking. And I think just because we're not reproductive anymore doesn't mean that we haven't anything to contribute. We can contribute so much more. We have so much experience, so much wisdom, so many things that we have been through that can help, uh, you know when we share them, others to not feel alone, or to feel empowered. And we should empower each other and not accept to be invisible. That's also this thing about competing, because when you're on that stage, everybody's looking at you. You're not invisible at all, right?
I was thinking about the differences between the way you and I competed, because yours was, okay, get up there and perform, and you have 60 seconds to do this lift. Me, it was this glittery, very skimpy bikini, really high heels, and I don't wear high
Oh,
heels very
yeah.
often. And you had to turn and pose and show the judges, and you had like, I don't know, it was like less than 30 seconds to capture their attention.
Wow.
Very, very different,
Yes.
but very intimidating for me, because that was completely not my personality to get up there and, sashay around the stage. It just
Yes.
wasn't me. So out of my comfort zone for sure, in a very different way than you, but out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that the emotions, and the instincts that we experience in those situations are very similar. It's like, you just sort of vulnerable up there. Everybody looks at you, even whether you lift or whether you pose. I think that like the emotion must be very similar. Like, oh my God, what am I doing? Why people are looking at me? Okay. And
Very, very similar.
yes, and for me, competing is also actually learning to deal with failure because you can't make every lift, and you have to learn not to beat yourself up, not to go back, especially if you like my last competition. That was like 3 weeks ago, actually. I didn't make the first two snatches. You have three attempts in every lift. I didn't make the first two. First one was given no lift. I don't know why. I thought it was a good lift. And the second one, I went crazy and pulled too hard, and it went away towards the back. So I had to really focus on the third one to get one good lift in, and that's a great challenge because you really have to forget everything that went on before. You have to really push that out of your mind and just focus on this one thing. And all these things, and this is a big part of my message, like especially the training. In training you overcome resistance, you have to learn how to focus. All this carries over into life. You learn to deal with things in a different way in other areas of life too when you do this training.
Oh, yes. It builds resilience. And I want to lean into that word because that's been popping up. You know how something will suddenly it's everywhere in your life. Like somebody's handed me a book about resilience, and all of a sudden it's been on the forefront of my mind that it's something that we're not encouraged to have anymore, or at least in our culture, I think in Western civilization, but it's something that's so important. How do you view resilience? Where does it fall into everything that you do and with your clients?
Yeah, I have sort of made up my own metaphor, my own image of resilience, because there's one thing that I think is um, quite harmful. This notion that resilience, or even willpower or discipline, all these things, the notion that those are character or personality traits, like they're innate. And some people have it and others don't have it. And if you feel you're not resilient, means that, something's wrong with you or you're a bad person. I see these things, especially resilience, actually more as a skill that you can develop. And I see resilience as a safety net that you knit for yourself. Because what does it mean to be resilient? It means to come back from a setback, from a defeat, from a low blow. And I came up with this idea when I talked to so many women who told me, oh, a few years ago, I was in great shape. I trained 3 times a week with a PT. I ate well. I lost weight. I felt fantastic. And then the PT moved away and it all fell apart. And I thought, how can you build your foundation of health and strength and wellness on one person on this planet? That's not a safety net. I think resilience is when you have several points of support that you can fall back on if one of the others fails. Like, can have a PT, but maybe you also want to have some buddies you train with. You want to have good family support. You want to have just like a great home environment, everything to support your lifestyle. And then when one thing breaks away, and that will always happen, life always gets in the way, right? You have all these other knots that keep your net together, and then you can bounce off them and come back and retie the broken knot. And I think it's really crucial to know that it's really not because there's something wrong with you or your character or your, it's not ethical or there's no moral value to this. It's like a skill and everybody can develop it.
I agree with that. I think it's like a muscle that you build, and the more you use it, the more it's going to develop, the more it's going to grow. And we have to experience setbacks. We have to experience failures. That's a part of life. It's going to happen. It's not an if. It's a win. And
Yes.
I think too, we're roughly the same age in our 60s. And I know when I grew up, and I'm sure this is different from country to country, but it was almost like I was encouraged to be fragile. And so
Hmm.
I had to unlearn that. I didn't have the resiliency as a child or even a young adult. That was something I had to learn and build over time.
Yeah, and that's the upbringing of girls. I have no idea how it is today. Um, I try to raise my daughter also in a spirit of wanting to be strong mentally and physically, but I wasn't raised with strength or physical strength. On the virtue catalog. I think our whole generation we were taught, as you said, to be fragile also physically, like be tiny and petite and elegant and as small as possible, um, and strength never really appears in the things they teach us. And the crazy thing is, if you're a mom and you carry two toddlers and the groceries back home, you're mighty strong. You're lifting heavy. Nobody's ever going to say that. Oh, that's very unfeminine. That wouldn't occur to anybody. So we're somehow expected to be strong, but we're not really supposed to talk about it or to make it an explicit goal. And that's something I want to change, because physical strength in anybody will benefit their health, their mental health, and all the people around them. So it's a win-win for everyone.
I was thinking as you were talking too of how important it is to hold on to the feminine quality of this. So sometimes people misinterpret. They think, oh, lifting is okay, you're going to bulk up, you're going to look like a man, it's manly. And I can't tell you how many women, I don't hear it as much today as I did a few years back, but they would say, I want to look toned, but I don't want to be
Yeah.
bulky, quote unquote bulky. And it's just very interesting. I don't want to compete. I just want to, I just want to look good in my swimsuit. But I think it's leaning into the strength, into the muscle, but into that femininity at the same time.
Absolutely. And women were always part of the physical activities. If you look at evolution, it's not like um, they weren't hunting, or they weren't gathering, or they weren't running or pushing or pulling. Um, I remember a few years back we went on holiday in Spain. We visited a church, and there was a marble relief from the Renaissance. So they had really it was a beautiful sculpture, and there were women in there, and man, they had guns. You wouldn't believe it. It was absolutely, they had really strong arms and biceps, and they were just, that was normal at the time, because women were just physically active and had to do everything too. And nowadays, you see them, with very, the ideal supposedly is very thin arms and stuff, but you're not gonna push or pull anything with that. And I think this is really still something we have to overcome, because many women still fear that muscle is going to make them look a certain way. When I think it's never muscle going to make you look bulky. It's always the fat that's going to make you look bulky.
True.
Yeah.
Yes, very true. And it's very hard for a woman unless she were to take something to build that kind of muscle like a man. I mean, I worked years to build muscle and very hard in the gym. A lot of
Yes.
days, a lot of heavy lifts, a lot of hours. I'm still in there, a lot of hours. And I never once got bulky. It was very hard
Yeah.
for me to grow those muscles.
Yeah. Sometimes it depends on what mood I'm in. Sometimes I laugh. Sometimes I get angry, because you see also, look at all those men trying to get bulky and toiling away for years. They want that look, and they have all the testosterone they need to get it, and still they can't get there. And then, a woman thinks, if I'm going to look at this pink dumbbell from 2 yards away, I'm going to blow up like Arnold. It's it's just, it's not possible. And I don't know where that idea comes from, which is weird. Because it must have, I think it's cultural still, and it's still this
Mhm.
idea that physical strength is perceived to be unfeminine, um, when it's not.
Yes, I think that's true. I grew up reading Cosmo magazine. I remember I had to sneak it because my mother thought it was a terrible magazine. And it was, all the models were extremely stick thin at that period of time. I don't know what it's like now, but as a young girl, you look at a glossy picture or you look at social media, which is kind of like the magazines that we used to look at and read.
Yes.
And then that becomes the norm of, oh, I need to look like that instead of taking your own uniqueness, your own body type and who you are, taking that perspective.
Yes. Um, and something that strikes me, and maybe it's also because with social media, images are everywhere um, and accessible to everyone. But I feel like there's the divide between what we see on social media and the reality of humanity is going bigger and bigger because those, you know, incredible bodies that you can see on Instagram, uh, they have nothing to do with the reality around us. I don't see people like this in the street.
Mm-mm,
I don't see
me
people like
neither.
this in the gym. I don't see them anywhere. I see a lot of people carrying too much weight um, because it's hard for them to, stay away from the food that is offered all the time, and it's hard for them to move enough because everything is arranged in a way for us not to move. I see lots of people carrying too much weight. I don't see these kind of perfect bodies. So I think that makes so many people feel worse because their reality is so far removed from what they see on social media. And the first reaction we have, especially as women, is always, oh my God, there must be something wrong with me. And um, yeah, I just want to shout it from the rooftops that there's nothing wrong with you. And the main goal is not to look like an Insta influencer, but to feel strong and confident and
Hmm.
happy. That's what it's about.
Yes, health and longevity. I know it shifted for me when I turned 60. I was still a little bit focused on the aesthetics in my 50s, which nothing wrong with that. I started doing what I did because I wanted to look good, and there's no crime in that at all. But it evolved as I moved through the journey, and then it became about, wow, how do I want to age? If I'm traveling, I want to get my carry-on up above. I
Yes.
want to be able to carry my own luggage. I want to be able to go up a flight of stairs if the escalator is broke. And so I got very practical minded with it. Now, you have a program where you work with women,
Yes.
and how do you get them started? Can you describe this to us a little bit, your methodology?
Absolutely, yes. So we start with an assessment um, to make sure where exactly they are at, their mobility, their strength, their ability to move, and everything. And I think this is, I work mostly with women over 40, and it's really crucial that we establish the status quo because so many women, they get hurt. They want to start moving, they follow an exercise program on YouTube, and there's great stuff on there, but it's just not made for us. And you need to start exactly where you're at. And if you haven't moved in a while, even if you used to be very active, if you haven't moved in a while, you have to check out where is your status quo. And then, depending on where they're at, I design a program for them that is just challenging enough but doable. And for someone who really hasn't moved forever, that could be just a very gentle reactivation of certain movement patterns, reconnecting the brain with the muscles, because sometimes they get put offline if they haven't been used for a long time. So you want to improve the quality of that signal that comes from the brain to the muscle. And others, it could already be more challenging. Mostly I start with body weight exercises and I make it something like 15 minutes that you can do at home. And that's mostly because we have to deal with the mental side too. And if we start too heavy, if go like, okay, you're going to go to the gym 3 times a week for an hour, that's a big, big change. And that's very hard to stick with when life gets in the way. And as you said, life always does get in the way. So if I told you to, you know, go to the gym 3 times a week, meaning, you have to pack a bag, you have to get in your car, drive through traffic, find parking, walk into the gym, get into the changing room, get changed, walk onto the gym floor. That's a lot of things you have to do before you've even moved a muscle. So I start with a home program for most women, 15 minutes a day to make like the entry level, like the threshold as low as possible. And once you start that, you feel better in 2 weeks. Something you're going to feel totally different in your body, and then that gives you momentum to keep going, and then go wherever you want to go. You can keep going, keep doing 15 minutes a day if you want to for a long, long time, or you move on to 3 times a week at some point when you feel stronger and more ambitious. But we need to create that momentum at the beginning, which is crucial, and it has to be as easy as possible.
I love that. I do something very similar. Most of my ladies start at home too. Some body weights, some bands, maybe some lighter dumbbells. And then inevitably, a lot of them will come and say they either build out their home gym more or they're ready to go to the gym. So I absolutely love that. Well, as we wrap up, I want to be respectful of your time. How can ladies get a hold of you, work with you, learn more about what you do? And was there anything that I didn't ask you that you would like to include?
Yeah, so to find me, you just go to my website, which is kimrahir.com, and there's a free assessment on there. So you can actually find out where you're at right now with your health and your strength. So it's holistic in its approach. It's not only about can you do a push up, the overall energy levels, mood, and things. We, get a good look at where you're at, because that allows you then, with that assessment, to know what your best next steps will be. That's on kimrahir.com. You can follow me on Facebook with my name also, Kim Rahir, and I share my weightlifting adventures. And I give a lot of useful tips and trainings. Um, I try to make it fun, so I'd love for you to come and have a look. And no, there's nothing I can add. You asked great questions. I think we've been through a lot of topics. The only thing I want to say is, if anybody out there thinks it's too late for them, it's not. It's never too late. You can always work around limitations. And the main thing is to do something today. Don't look too far ahead at the big picture. It's going to scare the living daylights out of you. Just do something today that's good for you. And then you can take it from there, and it's never too late.
I love that. I agree. It's never too late. Kim, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been just a delightful conversation. I know that many women are going to be inspired to take action. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this.
And to our listeners, wherever you are in the world, we wish you every blessing. Bye for now.